Billionaire finds a black girl sleeping in trash on Christmas Eve. The truth shocks him. The snow fell in thick, heavy sheets across Chicago's financial district, painting the city in a deceptive blanket of purity. Luke Everett stood at the window of his penthouse office, watching the Christmas Eve celebration 60 floors below. The crowds moved like ants through the streets, carrying shopping bags and holding hands, their laughter lost in the wind that howled against his windows. He swirled the whiskey in his crystal glass, the amber liquid catching the light from the city below. Another Christmas Eve, another night of avoiding the memories that haunted him every December 24th. 3 years ago, his brother Adam and sister-in-law Emma had died in that horrible accident, taking their 3-year-old daughter Anna with them. The police had searched for weeks, but the little girl's body was never found. They said she must have been swept away by the river that ran beside the crash site. Luke had paid for divers, search teams, everything money could buy. But money couldn't bring back the dead, and it couldn't heal the guilt that aided him every single day. He should have been there. Should have driven them himself that night instead of sending his driver. Should have insisted they stay one more day at his estate. Should have, could have, would have. The 3 phrases that had become his constant companions. His phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, breaking through his thoughts like a knife through butter. Caroline, his assistant, knew better than to call him tonight unless it was an emergency. He ignored it, taking another sip of whiskey as he watched a family below huddled together against the cold. The phone rang again, more insistent this time. With a heavy sigh, he answered. "This better be important, Caroline." Her voice was breathless, urgent in a way he'd never heard before. "Mr. Everett, I'm sorry to bother you, but security just called. There's been an incident at the West Side facility." Luke's construction company had been renovating an old warehouse district on Chicago's West Side, turning it into affordable housing, one of his few projects that actually meant something beyond profit margins. "What kind of incident?" he asked, already reaching for his coat. "They found someone in the construction site, sir. A child. Security thinks she might be hurt. They've called an ambulance, but given the weather, it might take time. I thought you should know since you're closer than—" Luke was already in the elevator before she finished her sentence. "I'm on my way. Tell them not to move her unless absolutely necessary." The drive through Chicago's snowy streets was treacherous, his Bentley sliding more than once on the icy roads. Luke gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, something pulling him forward with an urgency he couldn't explain. The West Side facility was 20 minutes away on a good day, but tonight, with the snow and the holiday traffic, it took nearly 40. As he pulled up to the construction site, he could see the security lights blazing, casting long shadows across the half-built structures. His security chief, Marcus, met him at the gate, his dark face grim beneath his wool cap. "Where is she?" Luke demanded, stepping out into the biting wind. Marcus led him through the maze of construction equipment and building materials, their footsteps crunching in the fresh snow. "We found her in the back alley, sir, behind the old dumpsters. Tom was doing his rounds when he heard the dogs." They rounded a corner, and Luke's heart stopped. 3 stray dogs were circling something small and dark against the white snow. Without thinking, Luke shouted, "Hey! Get away from her!" His voice cracked like thunder through the alley, sending the dogs scattering into the shadows. The smallest one turned back, growling low in its throat before Marcus stepped forward, and it fled. Luke ran to the small figure curled up between 2 overflowing dumpsters. She was tiny, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with dark skin that had an unhealthy gray tinge from the cold. Her clothes were nothing more than rags, a torn, adult-sized hoodie that swallowed her small frame, no shoes despite the snow, and pants that were more holes than fabric. But what struck Luke most was how still she was. She wasn't crying, wasn't calling for help. She just lay there, clutching something to her chest, her eyes closed tight as if she could will the world away. "Call the ambulance again," Luke ordered Marcus as he knelt beside her, not caring that the slush soaked through his expensive pants. "Tell them we have a child with possible hypothermia." His hands shook as he gently touched her shoulder. She was cold, so cold it scared him. "Hey there, sweetheart," he whispered, pulling off his coat to wrap around her. "You're safe now. Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. Large, brown, and filled with a fear so deep it took his breath away. She didn't speak, just clutched tighter to what he could now see was a teddy bear, worn and torn, missing an eye. Something glinted in the security lights, catching Luke's attention. Around her neck, barely visible beneath the filthy hoodie, was a silver chain. His fingers trembled as he gently moved the fabric aside. The pendant was small, delicate, with an inscription that made his blood run cold. E&A forever. Emma and Adam. The same inscription on the necklaces his brother had commissioned for their family when Anna was born. There had only been 4 made. Adam wore his until the day he died. Emma's was buried with her. Luke's sat in a drawer in his apartment, too painful to look at. And Anna's had never been found. "What's your name?" Luke's voice came out as barely a whisper. The girl looked at him with those huge eyes, so familiar it hurt. When she spoke, her voice was small, broken, like she hadn't used it in a very long time. "Anna." The world tilted on its axis. Luke couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It was impossible. Anna was dead. They'd had a memorial service. He'd thrown roses into an empty grave. But those eyes, God, those were Emma's eyes. And the shape of her face, even beneath the dirt and exhaustion, that was Adam's jawline. The ambulance arrived in a chaos of sirens and flashing lights. Luke refused to let go of Anna's hand as they loaded her onto the gurney. She hadn't spoken again, but her fingers gripped his with surprising strength. "I'm riding with her," Luke told the paramedic, a young woman who looked ready to argue until she saw something in his face that made her nod. The ride to Chicago General was a blur of medical terms and procedures. Anna's temperature was dangerously low. She was malnourished, dehydrated, and had injuries consistent with long-term neglect. But she was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. Luke called Caroline from the hospital waiting room while Anna was being examined. "I need you to do something for me, and I need it done quietly," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Pull everything from the accident 3 years ago. Every report, every witness statement, everything." Caroline, professional as always, didn't ask questions. "I'll have it ready by morning, sir." He also arranged for a private DNA test, paying cash to ensure complete discretion. If this was Anna, his Anna, then someone had hidden her for 3 years. Someone had let them all believe she was dead while she suffered who knows where. The doctor who emerged 2 hours later looked exhausted. Dr. Patricia. Williams was a small woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses. "Mr. Everett? I'm Anna's attending physician." She paused, consulting her chart. "That is the name she gave us, though she's been largely nonverbal since arrival." Luke stood, his legs stiff from sitting. "How is she?" Dr. Williams led him to a quiet corner. "Physically, she'll recover. She's suffering from malnutrition, exposure, and has some old injuries that concern me. Healed fractures that were never properly set, scars that suggest this child has been through significant trauma. But, Mr. Everett, it's the psychological damage I'm most worried about." She adjusted her glasses, choosing her words carefully. "This child shows signs of severe post-traumatic stress. She's almost completely nonverbal, shows signs of selective mutism common in abuse cases. She won't let anyone take the teddy bear from her, becomes extremely distressed if anyone tries. And there's something else." Luke's hands clenched. "What?" The doctor hesitated. "She keeps saying 2 words when she does speak. Find Mama. But when we ask about her mother, she shuts down completely." Luke was allowed to see Anna after she was settled in a private room. The hospital had cleaned her up, and in the soft light of the pediatric ward, he could see it even more clearly. The resemblance to Adam was unmistakable. She was sitting up in the bed, still clutching her bear, staring out the window at the falling snow. "Hi, Anna," Luke said softly, pulling a chair close to her bed. "Remember me?" She looked at him with those 2 old eyes and nodded slightly. "Are you hungry? The nurses said you haven't eaten." Another small nod. Luke had the cafeteria send up soup and sandwiches, sitting quietly while she ate with careful, measured bites, like someone who'd learned not to trust that food would always be there. After she'd eaten, Luke tried again. "Anna, can you tell me about your mama?" The change was immediate. She pulled back, shaking her head violently, clutching her bear so tight her knuckles went white. Okay, Luke soothed. We don't have to talk about that. How about, can you tell me about your bear? What's his name? Anna looked down at the one-eyed bear, her fingers gently stroking its worn fur. Buttons, she whispered. Mama gave me buttons. It was the most she'd spoken, and Luke didn't push for more. Caroline arrived at dawn, looking impeccable despite the early hour, carrying a leather folder thick with documents. Luke met her in the hospital's family conference room, away from Anna's room where a private nurse kept watch. What did you find? Luke asked without preamble. Caroline's expression was grim as she spread the papers across the table. The official report says Adam and Emma's car went off the bridge during the ice storm. They were found in the submerged vehicle. Anna's car seat was empty, window broken. The assumption was she was ejected and swept away by the current. She pulled out a photograph from the accident scene. But look at this. Luke studied the image. The car seat's straps were cut, not broken. Clean cuts. Someone took her out, he breathed. Someone saved her. Or took her, Caroline nodded. That's what I thought. So I dug deeper. The lead investigator on the case, Detective Raymond Morris, retired 6 months after the accident. Took early retirement, full pension, moved to Florida. She pulled out another document. But here's the interesting part. His bank records show a deposit of $50,000 2 weeks after the accident. Cash. No source listed. Luke's jaw clenched as he processed this information. Someone had paid off the detective. Someone had taken Anna and made everyone believe she was dead. But who and why? There's more, Caroline continued, pulling out a manila envelope. I had our security team review traffic cameras from that night. Most of the footage was supposedly corrupted due to the weather, but our tech guys managed to recover this. She handed him a grainy photo. It showed a figure carrying something small, something child-sized, away from the accident scene. The timestamp was 30 minutes before the first responders arrived. Someone was watching them, Luke said, his voice cold with fury. Someone caused that accident and took Anna. Caroline nodded. That's what it looks like. But Mr. Everett, if someone went to these lengths to take her and hide her for 3 years, why was she on the street? What happened? Before Luke could answer, his phone rang. It was the hospital's security. Mr. Everett, you need to come back to the room. Now. Luke ran through the hospital corridors, Caroline close behind. He burst into Anna's room to find her backed into the corner of her bed, eyes wide with terror, pointing at the window. The private nurse looked bewildered. She just started screaming, the nurse explained. She saw something outside and... Luke moved to the window and looked down at the parking lot 4 floors below. A figure in a black coat stood perfectly still, looking up at Anna's window. Even from this distance, Luke could see they were holding something. Binoculars. Caroline, get security down there now, Luke ordered. But by the time hospital security reached the parking lot, the figure was gone. Only footprints in the snow remained, and a single item dropped in the haste to leave. A photograph. Security brought it up, handling it carefully with gloved hands. It was a picture of Anna, taken recently, maybe within the last few days. She was sleeping in what looked like a basement, her bear clutched tight. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "She belongs to us. Stop looking or she disappears again." Luke made a decision then, one that would change everything. "We're moving her," he told Caroline. "Contact Dr. Williams. Tell her I'm taking Anna to my estate. I'll hire private medical staff." Caroline looked concerned. "Sir, is that wise?" "If someone's watching..." Luke's expression was steel. "My estate has better security than Fort Knox, and I'm done playing games. Someone stole 3 years from this little girl. 3 years from all of us. I'm not letting them take another day." He turned to Anna, who was watching him with those haunting eyes. "You're coming home with me, sweetheart. I'm going to keep you safe. I promise." For the first time since he'd found her, Anna reached out her hand to him. Not to take something, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Her small fingers wrapped around his, and she whispered one word that nearly broke him. "Uncle?" The DNA test would later confirm what Luke already knew in his heart. This was Anna, his brother's daughter, the child they'd mourned and buried in an empty grave. She was alive, damaged but alive, and someone had stolen her childhood for reasons he was determined to uncover. The move to Luke's estate happened under cover of darkness. 3 identical SUVs left the hospital at the same time, taking different routes. Anna rode with Luke in the middle vehicle, clutching buttons in Luke's hand with equal fervor. The estate was a fortress of modern security. Cameras, motion sensors, armed guards, and walls that had been reinforced after Luke started receiving death threats years ago from business competitors. If someone wanted to get to Anna here, they'd have to go through an army. Dr. Williams had agreed to make house calls, and Luke had hired a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, Dr. Sarah Chen, to work with Anna. But progress was slow. Anna would only speak to Luke, and even then, only in whispers and fragments. She woke up screaming from nightmares she couldn't or wouldn't describe. She ate like someone might take her food away at any moment, and she never ever let go of buttons. It was Dr. Chen who made the first breakthrough, 3 weeks after Anna had come to stay at the estate. "She's been drawing," the psychologist told Luke, showing him a series of pictures Anna had made with crayons. They were disturbing. Dark figures, basements, chains, but one drawing stood out. It showed a woman with long dark hair holding Anna's hand. "Mama?" Luke asked, pointing to the figure. But Anna shook her head. "Not Mama. Aunt Rita." The name hit Luke like a thunderbolt. Rita, Emma's sister, who had been estranged from the family for years due to her drug problems and criminal history. She hadn't even come to the funeral, sending only a brief note of condolence. Could she have taken Anna? But why? Caroline's investigation into Rita revealed a twisted story. Rita had been in deep debt to dangerous people at the time of the accident. $50,000 in debt, to be exact, the same amount that had mysteriously appeared in Detective Morris's account. Phone records showed she'd called Emma dozens of times in the weeks before the accident, calls that Emma never returned. And then the smoking gun. Rita had been arrested 6 months ago for drug possession. The booking photo showed her wearing a necklace, Anna's necklace, the one that matched the pendant Anna now wore, except Anna's was a fake, a cheap reproduction. Rita had the real one. Luke wanted to go to the police immediately, but Caroline urged caution. "We need more proof," she argued. "Rita's supposedly been in Mexico for the last 2 years. If we spook her, she might run, and we'll never get the whole truth." So they waited and watched, and slowly, Anna began to talk. It came in pieces, fragments of memory that Dr. Chen helped her process. Anna remembered the accident, the sound of breaking glass and screaming metal. She remembered someone pulling her from the car seat, remembered them saying, "Mama wants you to come with Aunt Rita now." But Emma had been unconscious, dying. She couldn't have said anything. Rita had lied to a traumatized 3-year-old using her dying mother's name to kidnap her. Anna told them about the basement where she'd lived for the first 2 years, how Aunt Rita would leave for days at a time, leaving Anna with just water and crackers. How there were bad men who would come and yell at Aunt Rita demanding money. How Rita would cry and promise to pay and then look at Anna and say, "You're going to make Auntie rich someday, baby. Your uncle has so much money, and he's going to share it with us." The plan became clear. Rita had taken Anna intending to use her as leverage against Luke to extort money from him. But something had gone wrong. Maybe she'd gotten too deep into drugs to execute her plan. Maybe she'd been afraid of getting caught. Or maybe, in her own twisted way, she'd developed feelings for the child she'd stolen and couldn't go through with it. The truth came out when Rita was arrested trying to cross back into the United States from Mexico. Caroline's private investigators had been tracking her, and when she made her move, they were ready. The FBI got involved when they realized this was a kidnapping case that crossed state lines. Rita, faced with life in prison, finally confessed everything. She'd been following Adam and Emma that night, high on meth, desperate for money she owed to dealers. She'd caused the accident by ramming their car, forcing them off the bridge. She hadn't meant to kill them, she claimed, just wanted to scare Emma into giving her money. When she saw the car go over, she'd panicked. But then she'd seen Anna, alive in the back seat, and had seen an opportunity. She'd taken the child, thinking she could raise her for a few years and then approach Luke for money, claiming she'd found his niece. But the drugs had taken over her life completely. She'd kept Anna hidden, moving from place to place, basement to basement. The girl had been enrolled in no schools, had seen no doctors. For 3 years, Anna had existed in a twilight world of neglect and fear. Until 2 months ago, when Rita had been arrested for possession and Anna had run away from the latest boyfriend Rita had left her with. She'd been living on the streets since then, surviving on scraps and kindness from strangers, until that Christmas Eve when Luke had found her. The trial was a media sensation. Billionaire finds missing niece alive after 3 years made headlines around the world. But Luke kept Anna away from all of it, protected in his estate while justice was served. Rita was sentenced to life in prison without parole for murder, kidnapping, and child abuse. Detective Morris was convicted of obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. The boyfriend and several others who had known about Anna but said nothing were also prosecuted. But for Luke, none of that mattered as much as the little girl who was slowly learning to smile again. Anna's recovery was measured in small victories. The first time she laughed at something on TV, the first night she slept without nightmares. The first time she called him Uncle Luke without fear in her voice. The first time she let someone else hold buttons while she took a bath. Dr. Chen said it would take years of therapy to undo the damage Rita had done. But children were resilient, she promised. With love, patience, and safety, Anna could heal. 1 year after that snowy Christmas Eve, Luke stood in the doorway of Anna's room. Her real room, not a hospital room or a safe house, but a space decorated with her favorite colors, purple and gold. She was sitting at her desk, doing homework from the private tutor who came every day. She was still behind academically, but catching up fast. Her intelligence, which had kept her alive on the streets, now helped her devour knowledge. Buttons sat on her bed, well-loved but no longer clutched desperately. He'd been joined by other stuffed animals, gifts from Luke and the staff who had all fallen in love with the brave little girl. "Uncle Luke?" Anna said, not looking up from her math worksheet. "Yeah, sweetheart," Luke replied, entering the room. "Do you think Mom and Daddy can see me from heaven?" she asked, her pencil pausing. It was a question she'd asked before, and Luke always gave the same answer. "I know they can, and I know they're so proud of how brave and strong you are." Anna nodded, seeming satisfied, and returned to her work. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "I'm glad you found me in the trash that night." Luke's throat tightened. "Me too, baby. Me too." The truth was, Luke didn't find Anna that night. She found him. She gave him purpose again, pulled him out of his own spiral of guilt and grief. The billionaire who had everything had been empty until a little girl with nothing had filled his life with meaning again. The investigation revealed that Anna had actually been in that alley for 3 nights before Luke arrived. She'd chosen that specific spot because she'd overheard someone at a shelter mention that some rich guy was building something for poor people there. In her child's mind, she'd thought maybe a rich person would help her. She'd been right. But what really shocked Luke was learning from the security footage that Anna had actually seen his car arrive at the construction site several times during those 3 nights. She'd hidden each time, too scared to approach. It was only when the dogs cornered her, when she had no choice, that fate had intervened. Or maybe, Luke thought as he watched his niece work on her homework, it wasn't fate at all. Maybe it was Adam and Emma, watching over their daughter, who had finally brought them together on that Christmas Eve. The second Christmas at the estate was different from any Luke had experienced in years. The massive house was decorated from top to bottom. Anna had insisted on helping with every single decoration. The 12-foot tree in the main hall was covered in ornaments Anna had made in her art therapy sessions, each one representing a memory or a hope for the future. There were paper angels with Emma and Adam's names, stars with Uncle Luke written in glitter, and even a special ornament for buttons. The house was full of people for the first time in years. Dr. Chen came for dinner, as did Caroline and her family. Marcus, the security chief who had been there that night, brought his grandchildren to play with Anna. Even Dr. Williams from the hospital stopped by with gifts. Anna was still quiet around strangers, but she smiled more now, and her laughter, when it came, was like music in the halls that had been silent for too long. That evening, after all the guests had gone home and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Luke found Anna sitting by the massive fireplace in the living room. She was holding a new photo album he'd given her, filled with pictures of Adam and Emma he'd collected over the years. She traced their faces with her small finger, memorizing features she was already beginning to forget. "Uncle Luke," she said quietly, "tell me about them again." So Luke sat beside her and told her stories. About how Adam had been terrible at sports but brilliant at math. How Emma had sung in the church choir and made the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. How they'd met in college, both reaching for the same book in the library. How they'd gotten married in a small ceremony in Luke's backyard because they didn't want anything fancy, just family. How excited they'd been when they found out they were having a baby. "They loved you so much," Luke told her, pulling her close. "From the moment they knew you were coming, you were their whole world." Anna leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I miss them," she whispered. "Even though I can't really remember them, I miss them." Luke kissed the top of her head. "I know, baby. I miss them too. Every day." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire crackle and dance. Then Anna said something that stopped Luke's heart. "But I'm glad I have you. I think they would be happy we have each other." Luke had to blink back tears. "Yes, sweetheart. I think they would be too." 3 years later, Anna stood on a stage at her new school, accepting an award for academic excellence. She was 10 now, tall for her age, with Emma's graceful features and Adam's determined jaw. She still had therapy twice a week, still had nightmares sometimes, still struggled with trust. But she was thriving in ways Luke had hardly dared to hope for. She'd insisted on attending regular school instead of continuing with private tutors, wanting to be normal. It had been terrifying for Luke to let her go, to trust other people with her safety. But Dr. Chen had been right. Anna needed to rejoin the world, not be hidden from it. She'd made friends, joined the chess club, discovered a love for science that reminded Luke painfully and beautifully of Adam. As she gave her brief acceptance speech, thanking her teachers and her uncle, Luke saw Caroline wiping away tears beside him. Anna's story had changed everyone who knew her. The staff at the estate, once formal and distant, had become like family. The security team didn't just protect Anna. They cheered at her soccer games and helped with her science projects. The gardener taught her how to grow tomatoes. The chef taught her how to make Emma's chocolate chip cookies from a recipe Luke had saved. But the most profound change was in Luke himself. The cold, distant billionaire who had once lived only for work had become someone else entirely. He'd restructured his entire company to allow him to work from home more. He'd started a foundation in Adam and Emma's names that helped find missing children and supported survivors of trafficking and abuse. He'd learned to braid hair for picture day, to check for monsters under the bed, to read the same story 5 times in a row without complaint. He'd learned that love wasn't just something you felt. It was something you did, every day, in 1,000 small ways. He'd also learned to forgive himself. Anna had helped him see that Adam and Emma wouldn't want him to carry guilt forever. They'd want him to live, to be happy, to take care of their daughter. And that's exactly what he was doing. The investigative aftermath had revealed even darker truths about Rita's network. She'd been part of a larger ring that trafficked children, though she'd kept Anna for herself rather than selling her. The FBI had used information from Anna's case to rescue 14 other children who'd been kidnapped and hidden. Anna had asked to meet some of them, and though it had been hard for her, she'd become a symbol of hope for those children and their families. Proof that even after years, loved ones could still come home. On the 5th anniversary of that Christmas Eve, Luke and Anna visited Adam and Emma's graves together. It had taken Anna 3 years to feel ready for this, and Luke had waited patiently for her to decide when she could handle it. She placed flowers on each headstone, yellow roses for Emma, who had loved them, and white carnations for Adam, who had given them to Emma on their first date. "Hi, Mama. Hi, Daddy," Anna said softly, her voice steady though tears ran down her cheeks. "Uncle Luke's been taking good care of me." I'm in 5th grade now, and I'm really good at math like Daddy was. I joined the choir like Mama, I still have buttons. He's kind of falling apart, but Uncle Luke knows someone who can fix him without changing him too much. She paused, touching each headstone gently. I love you. I'm okay. Uncle Luke says you're watching over me, and sometimes I think I can feel it. Like when I'm scared or sad, I feel warm, like someone's hugging me. I think that's you. Luke stood back, letting her have this moment. His own eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them away. Some tears deserved to be shed. That evening, as they drove home, Anna was quiet. Then, out of nowhere, she said, Uncle Luke, I want to be a detective when I grow up. Luke glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Oh yeah? Why's that? Anna's expression was serious, older than her 11 years. Because there are other kids out there like me. Kids who are lost or taken or hurt. I want to find them and bring them home. Luke nodded, his throat tight. I think you'd make an excellent detective. And she would. Luke knew she would, because Anna had learned something that most people never did. That sometimes the worst moments of your life could lead to the best. That being broken didn't mean you couldn't be whole again. That family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up when you needed them most. As they pulled into the estate, Anna suddenly said, Uncle Luke, I love you. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, but it still hit Luke just as hard. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky. It was something Emma used to say to Anna when she was a baby, according to a journal Luke had found. Now it was their thing, their connection to the past and their promise for the future. The story of the billionaire who found a little girl in the trash on Christmas Eve had become something of a legend in Chicago. But for Luke and Anna, it was simply their story, a story of loss and finding, of grief and healing, of the family you're born with and the family you choose. Every Christmas Eve, they had a tradition now. They would drive through the city, looking for people who might need help. They'd hand out coats and food, sometimes even hotel vouchers. Anna insisted on checking every alley, every dark corner. You never know, she'd say. Someone might be waiting to be found. And Luke would nod, remembering that cold night when he'd almost driven past that construction site, almost missed the alley, almost lost the chance to save not just Anna, but himself. Because that was the real truth that shocked him. Not just that Anna was alive, not just the conspiracy that had hidden her, but the simple fact that in saving her, she had saved him right back. The billionaire had all the money in the world, but it took a little girl with nothing but a one-eyed teddy bear to show him what real wealth looked like. It looked like bedtime stories and homework struggles, like soccer games and science fairs, like nightmares soothed and laughter shared. It looked like redemption and second chances, like hope in the darkest corners. Years later, when Anna graduated from the police academy, top of her class, of course, Luke stood in the audience with tears streaming down his face. She'd done it. She'd become Detective Anna Everett. She'd legally taken his last name at 13, her own choice, dedicated to finding the lost and bringing them home. Her first case was a missing child, a little boy who'd been taken by a non-custodial parent. Anna found him in 3 days, using a combination of traditional detective work and her own instincts, born from her experiences. When she brought that boy home to his mother, when she saw that reunion, she called Luke. I understand now, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I understand why you never gave up looking that night. Why you didn't just call someone else to check on a random child in an alley. Luke knew what she meant. It was the pull of human connection, the voice that says someone needs help, and you're the one who needs to give it. You were meant to find me, Anna continued, and I was meant to find all the others who are lost. And she did. Over her career, Detective Anna Everett would find 43 missing children, solve countless cases, and become a legend in her own right. But she always said her greatest accomplishment was surviving, long enough to be found that Christmas Eve in the alley. Luke lived to see Anna get married, to a fellow detective who understood her past, and loved her not despite it, but because it had made her who she was. He walked her down the aisle in place of the father who couldn't be there. In her wedding speech, Anna said, "They say you can't choose your family, but I disagree. Family chooses each other every day in every action. Uncle Luke chose me from that alley, but more importantly, he chose me every day after. Through the nightmares, the therapy, the struggles. He chose to be my father when mine couldn't be there. He chose to love a broken little girl and help her become whole. And I chose him right back. The wedding photo that made the front page showed Anna in her white dress, Luke in his tuxedo and clutched in Anna's other arm. Carefully preserved and restored, behind was buttons, a reminder of where they'd come from and how far they'd traveled together. When Luke passed away peacefully at 91, Anna was holding his hand. His last words to her were, "Thank you for saving me." She knew what he meant. The billionaire who'd found a black girl sleeping in trash on Christmas Eve had discovered something worth more than all his wealth, that love could resurrect the dead parts of your heart, that hope could bloom in the darkest places, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. Anna continued his foundation, expanded it globally, and saved hundreds more children. She told their story often, especially to the children she rescued. "Someone will come," she'd tell them when she found them in their dark places. "Someone will see you, and they will choose you, and you will choose them back. And together, you'll write a new story, one where the ending is so much better than the beginning." And she was right. She always was. Because Anna had learned the greatest truth of all from that Christmas Eve when she was 6 years old, sleeping in trash, waiting to be found. That love is the only force powerful enough to turn tragedy into triumph, loss into purpose, and a broken child and a grieving billionaire into a family. The truth that shocked Luke that night wasn't just that his niece was alive. It was that he'd been dead inside until she brought him back to life. Two lost souls, finding each other in the darkness, proving that sometimes the best families are the ones forged in the fires of adversity, bound not by blood alone, but by choice, by love, by the decision to show up for each other every single day. And so the story of the billionaire and the little girl became more than just a headline, more than just a Christmas miracle. It became proof that no one is too lost to be found, no one is too broken to be healed, and that sometimes when you save someone else, you end up saving yourself. That was the truth that shocked everyone who heard their story. That in the end, it wasn't about the money or the mystery or even the justice that was served. It was about two people who needed each other more than they could have ever imagined, finding each other at exactly the right moment, even when that moment seemed like the darkest night of their lives. 20 years after that fateful Christmas Eve, Anna stood in the same alley where Luke had found her. It had been transformed now. The construction site had become affordable housing, just as Luke had planned, and the alley was clean, well lit, with a small garden growing where the dumpsters had been. She came here every Christmas Eve, not just to remember, but to honor the journey. This year, she wasn't alone. Her daughter, Emma, named for the grandmother she'd never met, stood beside her, holding her hand. At 8 years old, Emma had the same curious eyes, the same determined spirit that had kept Anna alive all those years ago. "This is where Great-Uncle Luke found you?" Emma asked, looking around the transformed space with wonder. Anna nodded, kneeling down to her daughter's level. "Right here. I was sleeping right where those roses are growing now." Emma considered this seriously, the way children do when trying to understand something beyond their years. "Were you scared?" she finally asked. "I was," Anna admitted, smoothing her daughter's hair. "But I was also brave. Sometimes you can be both at the same time. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going, even when you are." Emma nodded, seeming to file this away for future reference. Then she asked the question Anna had been waiting for, the one every child eventually asks when they learn their parents' story. "Why did the bad lady take you away from your first parents?" Anna had thought long and hard about how to answer this question over the years. Dr. Chen, who had become a lifelong friend and Emma's honorary grandmother, had helped her find the right words. Sometimes people make terrible choices because they're hurt, or sick, or confused. What Aunt Rita did was wrong, very wrong, but it taught me something important, that even when bad things happen, good people will find you. Good people will help you, and you can become one of those good people who helps others. Emma seemed to think about this, then asked another question that showed wisdom beyond her years. Is that why you became a police officer? To be one of the good people who finds kids? Anna smiled, pulling her daughter close. That's exactly why. And you know what? In all the years I've been doing this job, I've learned something amazing. There are so many more good people than bad ones. For every person who might hurt a child, there are hundreds who would protect them. Uncle Luke taught me that. They stood together in the transformed alley, 3 generations connected by love and loss, triumph and tragedy. Anna's husband, Detective Marcus Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen despite the shared surname that had become a family joke, arrived with hot chocolate for everyone. He understood these Christmas Eve vigils, understood that some places become sacred not because of what they are, but because of what happened there. As they were preparing to leave, a sound made Anna freeze. It was a small whimper coming from behind a recycling bin. Her police instincts kicked in immediately, but it was Emma who moved first, fearlessly walking toward the sound. "Mama, look!" Emma called out, and Anna's heart stopped. Behind the bin was a small child, perhaps 4 years old, bundled in a thin jacket despite the freezing temperature. The child, a boy with deep brown eyes and tear-stained cheeks, looked up at them with a mixture of fear and hope that Anna recognized all too well. She moved quickly but calmly, not wanting to scare him. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly, using the same tone Luke had used with her so many years ago. "You're okay. We're here to help. Are you lost?" The boy nodded, clutching a small action figure the way Anna had clutched buttons. "My mommy said to wait here. She said she'd come back." His voice was small, scared. "She said to hide if anyone came, but I'm cold." Anna exchanged a look with Marcus, who was already calling for backup and an ambulance. But Anna's focus was entirely on the child. She took off her coat, wrapping it around his small shoulders. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "Jerome," he whispered. "Jerome Williams." The name rang a bell, and Marcus was already checking. Within minutes, he had the information. Jerome Williams, age 4, reported missing 3 days ago after his mother, struggling with addiction, had disappeared from a treatment center with him. It was a different story from Anna's, but the same in all the ways that mattered. A child lost, a child in need, a child waiting to be found. "Jerome," Anna said, keeping her voice steady and warm, "we're going to help you find somewhere warm and safe, okay? And we're going to make sure you're taken care of." The boy looked at her with those big eyes, and then he looked at Emma, who had moved closer. Child to child, Emma held out her hand. "It's okay," Emma said with the confidence only children possess. "My mama saves kids. It's her job. She's really good at it." Jerome took Emma's hand, and in that moment Anna saw the cycle continuing. Not the cycle of hurt and loss, but the cycle of rescue and redemption, of reaching out and holding on. The ambulance arrived, and Anna rode with Jerome, just as Luke had ridden with her. She held his hand while the paramedics checked him over, stayed with him at the hospital, made sure he had food and warmth and someone to tell him he was safe now. The investigation would reveal that Jerome's mother had left him in the alley and hadn't returned, lost to her addiction. But unlike Rita, she would later get help, get clean, and with supervised visits and years of work, slowly rebuild a relationship with her son. Jerome would be placed with his grandmother, who had been searching for him desperately. It wasn't the same as Anna's story, but it didn't need to be. Every child's story was unique, but they all deserved the same thing. Someone to find them, someone to choose them, someone to say, "You matter." Later that night, after Jerome was safe with his grandmother and the reports were filed, Anna's family returned to the estate, Luke's estate, which Anna had inherited and turned into a haven not just for her family, but for the foundation's work. The massive house regularly hosted children who needed temporary safety, families working toward reunification, and survivors of trafficking learning to rebuild their lives. Emma ran ahead to the Christmas tree where presents waited. Not too many, Anna was careful about that, teaching her daughter that love wasn't measured in material things, But there was one special gift Anna gave Emma every year, a new ornament for their tree. This year's ornament was a silver star with the inscription, "Be the light in someone's darkness." Emma read it carefully, then looked up at her mother. "Like Great Uncle Luke was for you?" Anna nodded, tears pricking her eyes. Exactly like that. As the years passed, the story of the billionaire who found a black girl sleeping in trash on Christmas Eve became more than just their family legend. It became a reminder that miracles don't always look like miracles when they're happening. Sometimes they look like tragedy, like loss, like a desperate situation with no hope in sight. But Luke had taught Anna, and Anna had taught Emma, and Emma would teach her children. You show up anyway. You look in the dark corners. You reach out your hand. You choose love over fear, hope over despair, action over indifference. The foundation Luke had started in Adam and Emma's names had grown into an international organization. They'd found hundreds of missing children, supported thousands of families, changed laws, and shifted how society looked at missing and exploited children. But for Anna, the numbers were never just statistics. Each child found was a Jerome, a scared little soul waiting for someone to say, "You're safe now." Each reunion was a chance for a family to heal. Each success was a tribute to Luke, to Adam and Emma, and to all the children who were still waiting to be found. Anna often spoke at conferences, training new detectives and social workers. She would tell them about that Christmas Eve, about Luke, about Buttons and the necklace, and 3 years of darkness before the light. But she would always end with the same message. The truth that shocked my uncle that night wasn't that I was alive. It wasn't the conspiracy or the crime. The truth that shocked him was how easy it would have been to drive past, to not look, to assume someone else would help. The truth that shocked him was that he almost missed the most important moment of his life because it came disguised as an interruption, an inconvenience, a problem that wasn't his to solve. But he stopped, he looked, he acted, and that made all the difference. She would pause, looking at the faces of those who would go on to save other children, and add, "Every day you have the chance to be someone's Luke. Every day there's a child waiting to be found. Maybe literally, maybe figuratively, they're waiting for someone to see past the surface, past the difficulty, past the brokenness, and recognize the human being who deserves to be saved, to be loved, to be chosen." The truth was, Anna had long ago forgiven Rita. Not because what Rita did was forgivable, but because holding on to that anger would have been letting Rita steal more from her than she already had. Rita had died in prison 5 years into her sentence, alone and unrepented. Anna had been notified but hadn't attended the burial. That chapter was closed. But she had attended many other funerals over the years. Detective Morris, who had written her a letter of apology before his death that she'd never answered, and others who had been part of that dark network. Each death was a reminder that justice and revenge were different things, that healing came not from others' suffering but from choosing to break the cycle. Anna's own children, Emma and her younger brothers, Luke and Adam, grew up knowing their family's story. They knew about the Christmas Eve rescue, about Buttons, who sat in a place of honor in a glass case in the family room, about the grandfather they'd never met who had chosen love over grief. They grew up in a house full of rescued children, temporary siblings who came and went, each with their own stories of loss and hope. They learned that family wasn't just about who you were born to, but about who you stood with, who you fought for, who you refused to give up on. Emma, following in her mother's footsteps, would become a social worker specializing in child trauma. Luke would become a doctor, working with trafficking survivors. Adam would take over the foundation, expanding its reach even further. Each of them carried forward the legacy of that Christmas Eve, proving that one moment of choosing love over indifference could ripple through generations. They all knew the story by heart, but Anna would still tell it every Christmas Eve, gathered around the fireplace in the same room where Luke had once told her about her parents. She would tell them about the cold, the fear, the dogs, and the man who had looked like an angel appearing through the snow. She would tell them about Buttons, about the necklace, about 3 years of darkness and a lifetime of light that followed. She would tell them about choices. Rita's choice to take her, Luke's choice to save her, her choice to survive, and ultimately, everyone's choice to heal. On what would have been Luke's 100th birthday, the city of Chicago renamed the street where he'd found Anna. It was now called Second Chance Street, and a small plaque told the story of a billionaire and a little girl who had saved each other. The alley had become a memorial garden, tended by families who had been reunited through the foundation's work. Each plant represented a child found, a family healed, a second chance granted. Anna stood there with her family, her grandchildren now old enough to understand the significance of this place. Little Marcus, Emma's son, just 6 years old, the same age Anna had been that night, looked up at his grandmother with curious eyes. "Grandma Anna," he asked, "why do you come here every year? Doesn't it make you sad?" Anna knelt down, just as Luke had knelt beside her all those years ago, just as she had knelt beside Jerome, just as she would kneel beside any child who needed to hear this truth. "It makes me remember," she said softly, "that the worst night of your life might actually be the beginning of your best life. It makes me remember that there's no such thing as too broken to be fixed, too lost to be found, too damaged to be loved. It makes me remember that sometimes angels look like tired billionaires in expensive coats, and sometimes miracles happen in dirty alleys, and sometimes families are made not from perfect circumstances but from broken pieces that choose to fit together anyway." She stood, taking his small hand in hers, feeling the echo of another hand, another night, another child who needed to believe in tomorrow. "But mostly," she said, looking at the garden that had grown where despair once lived, "it reminds me that every ending can be a beginning, if someone is brave enough to turn the page." As they walked away, 4 generations connected by love and loss, by choices made and chances taken, Anna thought she felt something. A warmth, a presence, a feeling like someone was watching with approval. Maybe it was Luke. Maybe it was Adam and Emma. Maybe it was just the spirit of every child who had been found because their story had inspired others to look, to care, to act. But whatever it was, it felt like completion. The circle that had begun with tragedy had come full around to triumph. The little girl who had been thrown away like trash had become a woman who saw treasure in every discarded soul. The billionaire who had everything and nothing had gained a family that stretched across decades and continents, bound not by blood, but by the choice to love despite the risk, to hope despite the odds, to show up despite the cost, and in the end, that was the truth that shocked everyone who heard their story. That love could be stronger than loss, that hope could grow in the darkest places, that families could be made from the most unlikely ingredients, and that sometimes, just sometimes, when you save someone else, they save you right back. The story of the billionaire who found a black girl sleeping in trash on Christmas Eve had become legend. But for Anna and her family, it was simply the truth they lived every day, that everyone deserves to be found, everyone deserves to be chosen, and everyone deserves a second chance at love. And so the ripples continued, spreading outward from that one moment when a broken man chose to stop for a broken child, proving forever that the smallest acts of kindness could change not just 2 lives, but hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions, because every person who heard their story was reminded to look a little closer, care a little more, and never, ever drive past someone who might be waiting to be found. That was Luke's true legacy, not the billions he'd made or the companies he'd built, but the moment he'd chosen to stop, to look, to care. And Anna's legacy was taking that moment and multiplying it, spreading it, teaching the world that beneath every discarded soul was a human being waiting to bloom, if only someone would give them the chance. The truth that shocked Luke that Christmas Eve had become the truth that saved countless others, that love was not a finite resource to be hoarded, but an infinite force that grew the more it was given away. And in a world that often seemed cold and cruel, that truth was the warmest light of all, a beacon calling every lost soul home, promising that somewhere someone was looking for them, someone would choose them, someone would say, "You matter, you're worth it, you're family now."